Welcome to the Peter King Podcast. As usual, a lot going on in the National Football League after 7 weeks. Looking forward to week 8. And I'm joined by Myles Simmons, my friend and partner from NBC Sports, to break all of it down. We're going to have a guest today, this week, Joe Person, who covers the Carolina Panthers for The Athletic. I kind of thought that the Panthers were the forgotten entity. It almost seemed we talked more about the Rams than about the Panthers. The Rams who didn't get Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, the 49ers, everybody talked about. We all talked about the 49ers who got Christian McCaffrey. Where does this leave the Carolina Panthers? We're going to talk a little bit about that in our first block, and then we'll get into our conversation with Joe Person. We're also going to hit on the big news of the week, that almost no matter what happens, it looks like the career of Matt Ryan is very much in dry dock with the announcement that the Indianapolis Colts, according to head coach Frank Reich, plan to start Sam Ehlinger, the 6th-round pick from Texas, for the rest of the season at quarterback. A startling move for a 3-3-1 team. But Matt Ryan leads the NFL in all quarterbacks in the league in turnovers. And the Colts just did not feel that they could go any farther. We're also going to touch on, in this podcast, Geno Smith and his ridiculous maturity and great play in Seattle. We are going to implore Tua Tagovailoa, please slide. Patrick Mahomes played an incredible game and nobody noticed. In fact, it's the best recorded game in the history since 2016 of next-gen stats and how they rank quarterback performance. And stupid me, I didn't even name him an offensive player of the week. But we're also going to talk about Joe Burrow, who perhaps also played the best game of his NFL life on Sunday. And I'm going to ask Myles, which team has a better chance to rebound? Tampa Bay or Green Bay? Which Bay has a better chance to make something of this horrible season? At least what looks to be a horrible season. Myles, how are you doing? What really hits your cranium as we start the podcast this week?
I will start the podcast with a little pat of the back for myself, which sometimes we like to do in this business when we get something right. And, the whole blind squirrel finding a nut thing. But Peter, when I was watching that Thursday night game between the Broncos and the Colts on October 6th, I put it out there that the Colts really need to take the long weekend and start thinking about starting Sam Ehlinger, because it just looked that bad from Matt Ryan. So today I feel a little vindication.
Well, if you've thrown 9 interceptions, you've lost 3 fumbles in 7 games. I think, when it was reported in Indianapolis on Monday that there was a lengthy meeting after the Colts got back from Nashville on Sunday night. Lengthy meeting between owner Jim Irsay, GM Chris Ballard, and coach Frank Reich. And look, I kind of know the way the Colts work, all right? And it isn't like Jim Irsay pounds his fists on the table and says, we're not starting Matt Ryan anymore. The way Jim Irsay works is that he'll sit at a table, he'll probably seethe a little bit, and he'll say, guys, what are we doing? Really, what are we doing? The old Albert Einstein, and I'm going to screw this up, but, what's I'm going to say it and then you're going to know it, but doing the wrong thing over and over and over again is the definition of insanity, which
Yes.
is not what he said, but it's something like
right. Yes, it's what
so,
players love to quote it. Yeah, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
That's it. So, like, here's the thing that got to me. They've played 7 games, the Indianapolis Colts. They scored 0 points at Jacksonville.
Mhm.
They scored 17 points against Tennessee at home. They scored 12 points against Denver, no touchdowns. And they scored 10 points at Tennessee against the Titans. Now, obviously, they have been without, for most of the season, a fully functioning Jonathan Taylor. And that really hurts their offense. Even though he's playing, he's not perfect. Okay. But the veteran quarterback that Matt Ryan was supposed to be, settle things down, get everybody in the right place, leader. Look, everybody loves his leadership qualities.
Mm-hmm.
But, and, he's been as accurate as usual. But it's just, so much of watching the Colts, to me, it's kind of strange, but I look at his 68% completion percentage and I say, man, that really seems wrong, because I've seen him misthrow so many balls. So anyway, I think it makes sense. I got a couple of Ehlinger stories to tell you, but tell me if this makes sense to you, especially to do it now, coming into for what Indianapolis has a very kind of a tough stretch.
Well, it's kind of a twofold thing, right? Because if you understand that Matt Ryan's not going to get you where you need to go, then at a certain point, maybe it is best to just kind of cut your losses and say, well, let's see what Sam Ehlinger can do. Because if he turns out to be a good quarterback, a viable starting quarterback, then we can continue with him, right? We can build around him. If he doesn't, then odds are we're going to be picking at a high spot in the draft, and that's how we get our next quarterback. So, and beyond that, it might not be the current football regime that picks that guy. So perhaps that is an attracting factor to new potential suitors, right? So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. And I don't necessarily think that this means that Chris Ballard and Frank Reich won't be there next year. But I think right now it's just very clear that even though Matt Ryan is not the only problem that the Colts offense has, I mean, that offensive line, they keep shifting it. They've been doing different things. It's not been playing up to the standard that they've had there. And also they're not being playing up to their paychecks. Right. Ryan wasn't really going to be the solution. You look at that pick 6 that he had yesterday, and I know that Frank Reich kind of tried to take some heat off of it with saying that, he got the play call in late because he was arguing with the officials about the non-face mask call. But at the same time, Ryan is such a veteran quarterback that he's got to know, don't throw that ball there. Don't put the ball in harm's way. And it's the same on the second interception that he threw to that linebacker, David Long. So it's just not been good for Matt Ryan. His lack of mobility is the big factor, I think, in what they've, been able to do, what defenses, I should say, have been able to do in bringing him down and sacking him, causing him to fumble. It's just not been good enough from Matt Ryan. And that's why at this point, it's like, well, we ought to try something. And this is what they're going to try. And I'm interested to see if it actually works.
So here's my Ehlinger story. And I think those are good points, Miles, that I think it's time to try something else. Because clearly, 7 games has shown this just isn't working. So this happened in training camp 2021. I was in Westfield, Indiana, covering the Colts in camp, and a long conversation after practice with Frank Reich. And at that time, Carson Wentz may or may not have been ready to start at the start of the season, in 2021. And I asked Reich about his options. And one of the things he said is that, because I said, look, you may only have to play somebody else for a game or two if Wentz isn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
And Reich said that day, look, if you're a good coach, and I think I am a good coach, you can get anyone ready to play one football game, which I didn't really understand. And he goes, if you draft a player, then you have seen something in that player to make you believe that he's got a chance to help your team. Well, what did you see? Here's what we saw in Sam Ehlinger, blah, 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 blah. And he was talking about how, okay, you probably don't want to play him for 6 or 7 games because he's just not ready for that right now. But for one game, we like the following things that he can do. And we know that he's got the brain to adapt to this circumstance, everything like that. And he has the physical and mental toughness to, to take some hardship. So that has kind of stuck with me. This year, Frank Reich, again, was pretty high on Ehlinger when we talked, but let's be honest, he was positive. He told me, this is the guy finally who I think is going to be our quarterback for more than 1 year.
Right.
Because they have gone and had a single quarterback. They've gone from Andrew Luck to Jacoby Brissett to Phillip Rivers to Carson Wentz to Matt Ryan. And now he thought, okay, we're going to have Matt Ryan for 2 or 3 years. This is great. And obviously now he turns to Ehlinger in the middle of the season. But what I was going to say, Miles, is that in the preseason this year, the Colts really thought that, okay, look, we got a great backup in Nick Foles, and so he's going to be the guy to put out the fires. But we think we have a chance to have a quarterback who is going to be able to play. Ehlinger was 24 of 29 in the preseason, 83%. No fumbles, no interceptions. And the vibe I got from camp is that I don't know when it's going to be, but at some point we're going to give this guy a chance. So I don't know. I kind of like the move.
Yeah, I mean, I like it too. And I think that's interesting that it's not just, oh, we think we have to do something because Matt Ryan is playing at this level, right? It seems like it's more of a, we feel like we can give Sam Ehlinger a chance to be very successful. And I do think when you have a running back that is a threat like Jonathan Taylor is, when things are right around him, the offensive line has got to play better. They've got to block better as a whole. And Sam Ehlinger's got to be able to get that offense in and out of the right plays. We talk about game manager as if it's some dirty term, but if you can't manage the game properly from the quarterback position, then you can't be successful at all. Right? What are the things we've been talking about with Russell Wilson, where you're getting pressure coming right up the middle at you? Now, those are protection issues that quarterbacks have to be able to diagnose and solve before the play even begins. So we'll have to see how Ehlinger does in that regard. But just having somebody like Jonathan Taylor, who is the threat at running back that he is, that helps a young quarterback who's going to be making, his first starts. It helps him immensely, I think.
So Ehlinger goes starting this week. It was supposed to be the Carson Wentz Bowl.
Yeah.
When the Washington Commanders played in Indianapolis. But instead of Carson Wentz, it's going to be Taylor Heineke for Washington. And instead of Matt Ryan, it'll be Sam Ehlinger. So that's quite a come down from Carson Wentz versus Matt Ryan, and let's see who made the right decision. But, the last very quick point I would make is that I find it amazing that somehow, some way, since the day Andrew Luck announced that he was walking off campus, that, the Indianapolis Colts just have not been able to find a quarterback. It's just the craziest thing because they're smart people. Chris Ballard's very smart. Frank Reich is very smart. And I can't fault any single decision any single decision that they've made. But it's just amazing that here they are, two really bright people and a very, very good offensive minded Frank Reich. And they are going to play for the rest of this season, a 6th round pick. Who knows? There have been some pretty good 6th round picks. One in particular that has played quarterback at a decently high level in NFL history. But it's just wild to me that 6 starting quarterbacks in 5 years, including Andrew Luck. It's just really nutty,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that retirement decision kind of sent that organization into a tailspin, right? And they have not been able to correct that. And it seemed like last year, maybe that was going to do it with Carson Wentz, and okay, you can stabilize that position, not just for this year, but for years to come with somebody who knows him, who's familiar with him, who can get the best out of him. But then that didn't work. Right. So then you go and you get Matt Ryan, another veteran who, he's not necessarily the same guy that won the 2016 MVP, but he's got something left in the tank and he can stabilize the position. And my gosh, all the reports that were coming out of Indianapolis from the offseason program and training camp, Matt Ryan sped up practice. His leadership is so good, and he's gotten everybody on the same page, and it's this and it's that. And then you come to the regular season and you see that it's just not there anymore for Matt Ryan. So again, I don't know if Sam Ehlinger is going to be the guy who can really stabilize that position for them, but I understand why at this point they had to try it. I really do.
Yeah. Hey, let's get to Christian McCaffrey. We're not going to know whether this was the good decision or bad decision for the 49ers in a long time, but I really like that the Rams didn't do it. Okay.
Me too.
And because, as I wrote in my column, if they had made this trade, it was going to cost them their lone remaining draft picks in the first 4 rounds of this draft. They were already without their 1, 4, and 5. They had a 5th round compensatory pick coming, but they were out their 1, 4, and 5. And if they had to trade their 2 and 3, the bad part of it for the Rams, that wasn't going to be it. They were going to have to trade their 2 and 3 and then some. That would have left them without a draft choice until around number 160 in the draft. And if you look at the Rams right now, they've got some needs. Tell me what you think of the Rams not getting Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I think it's the best thing for them. And, I was working for that organization when Christian McCaffrey was coming out of the draft, and I know how much they liked him, even though they didn't have a 1st round pick, and there was absolutely no way that they were going to be able to select him. But I also understand how Sean McVay could certainly use a weapon of Christian McCaffrey's caliber in that offense. You take some pressure off of Cooper Kupp. You do some other things. You have another good, viable running back that they need for that offense. But Christian McCaffrey doesn't play center. He doesn't play guard. He's not going to help you.
Doesn't play left tackle.
Right, exactly. He's not going to help you along the offensive line, which is where things are the most dire right now. So, I think it is the best thing for the Rams that this did not happen. Now, they've not necessarily had the most success with drafting 2nd round picks in the McVay less need era. You look at Gerald Everett, and he's made some plays, right? I mean, the biggest thing he ever did was catch the game-winning touchdown against the Kansas City Chiefs in 2018. And, we're talking about 2018. That's a really, really, really long time ago. And since he's been with the Seahawks, and now he's with the Chargers. So like that's one of them. Tutu Atwell, he's had I think 1 or 2 touches in 2 years. Cam Akers, that's not working out. Van Jefferson, he's hurt right now, so at least that's somebody where you've seen contributions from, but they still need that second round pick. And if nothing else, they can flip that second round pick into later picks because they need some shots at the dartboard to just add to the depth. You know, whether it's offensive line, whether it's skill players, whether it's defensive players, as you try to retool, reload around Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald, you just need more shots at the dartboard to get those talented guys. So I agree with you, Peter. I think it is the best thing for the Rams that they weren't able to get this done.
As far as the 49ers go, I like the fact that they're willing to put themselves out. They're willing to take risks, sort of like the Rams are.
Right.
But, and again, this isn't, if I were them, I probably would have done this. But my main misgivings, because Kyle Shanahan, I talked to him at length on Saturday night after their meetings, and I said to him, you know, you realize when we talk about risks that you took in rounds 2 through 5, you traded a 2, 3, 4, and a 5. And in rounds 2 through 5, since you've been there, you've taken in those rounds George Kittle, Fred Warner, Deebo Samuel, Dre Greenlaw, and Talanoa Hufanga. And he interrupted me and he goes, for every one of those have been great, I can name about 10 others who haven't been great. Of course, he's exaggerating, but what he means is that, you know, you can pick out these guys, but there are others who didn't work. But I want you to remember the words of Jimmy Johnson. Everybody thinks of Jimmy Johnson as this brilliant draft manager, and he was very good at it. But he also told me several times that one of his secrets was just get a lot more draft picks than anybody else. Okay. Because I'm not that much smarter than anybody else, if I'm smarter at all. And having more picks allows you to pad your stats. You know, it allows you to make mistakes, knowing some of those guys are going to work. But if you only have one pick and it doesn't work, well, that's it. Right. And San Francisco's margin for error without these 4 picks over the next 2 drafts in these areas, their margin for error is going to be minuscule.
Absolutely. You know, the example I always point to when people talk about the draft and, you know, having more shots at it, the 2014 then St. Louis Rams, excuse me, the Rams had 2 first-round picks. One of them was Aaron Donald. The other was Greg Robinson. And Greg Robinson was number 2 overall. But who remembers that? Because the Rams drafted Aaron Donald, right? So I think it just speaks to that point. The more shots you have at it, the more chances you have to get it right. Then when you do get it right, it's like, oh my gosh, you're brilliant. So, I mean, this is why the Panthers wanted to make that trade. They need more shots at the board to retool, reload under their next head coach. You know, they traded a bunch of picks to get Sam Darnold, to get Baker Mayfield. Neither of those guys worked out. So now you trade somebody in Christian McCaffrey who's been hurt the last couple of years. And he's only played 10 games in 2020 and 2021 combined. Now, he's been healthy this year, and that's great. I think we all want to see Christian McCaffrey healthy. We all want to see him play to his top ability. And he'll really have a chance to do that this week because San Francisco's playing the Los Angeles Rams. And when those 2 teams get together in the regular season, San Francisco tends to come out on top, at least in the last few years. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he can really affect and change that offense, especially with the full week of practice. And the more comfortable he gets in that scheme and in that system, hopefully Jimmy Garoppolo will be able to showcase all of those guys properly and not make some of the boneheaded decisions that he sometimes tends to make, like he did on Sunday when he threw an interception at the goal line.
Myles, let's for the Carolina portion of this deal, let's get into my conversation with Joe Person of The Athletic, who's covered the Panthers forever, a really bright guy. Little known fact about Joe Person. Joe Person was a teammate of Mike Tomlin at William and Mary when they both played college football. You see what you learn on this podcast that you never would know. Anyway, let's get into my conversation now with Joe Person. So happy to be joined by Joe Person. He joins us from the field at Bank of America Stadium, Charlotte, North Carolina. And Joe, I guess I do want to start by informing my audience about Joe Person, the Mike Tomlin teammate, which is one of those stories that the first time I heard it, I said, no way. But it is true, isn't it? That you were a teammate at the College of William and Mary with Mike Tomlin in 1991 and 1992.
Yeah, I love that you saw me later on in life, and there's no way this guy was any sort of athlete, even at William and Mary. But yeah, it was that was a cool experience. And Mike was a lot more. He was more intense than I was then and now. But he was he was a good athlete. I mean, I think I remember you doing some stuff with him over the years, even in some of the William Mary stuff, Peter. And he was very into the tape and that side of the X's and O's. And much to my detriment, probably, I was more into the people and the stories of sports. So I guess we both ended up where we were supposed to be.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. My brother went to William and Mary back in the late 60s. And I remember thinking that it is the perfect place to go to college. Not only is it beautiful, but the emphasis on academics there above all else, even if you might have gone there and thought, hey, it's cool to play football. I always thought that was kind of a cool thing. I think when my brother was there, if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong, I think Marv Levy was the coach of the football team. But anyway, it was just sort of a fun little angle. And I know Tomlin over the years, I think, has really appreciated what the academic side did for him there.
It was a neat experience, and you bring up a good point. I mean, it has a long, for being just kind of a small little school, liberal arts school in Williamsburg, Virginia. It has a pretty strong coaching tree history with, you mentioned Marv Levy, Lou Holtz went through there. Obviously, more recently, Tomlin and Sean McDermott.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's cool, and I was glad to spend some time there.
Oh, okay. Last thing, what was Mike Tomlin like as a player? Was he ferocious?
So he was a lean wideout from the Hampton Roads area of Virginia, very talent-rich area. That obviously I think Michael Vick was from that area, and he was good, Peter. Like I remember, so as you said, I was a couple years ahead of him, and he started at least as a sophomore. He was already in the starting lineup and probably got reps, as I recall, as a freshman. So he was a lot more skilled than I was, for sure.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the McCaffrey deal, but I guess what really interested me in this is a week or so ago, you know, I'm not on the phone 12 hours a day anymore, but a week or so ago, I was talking to a very well-respected general manager, and I said, what can the Panthers get for Christian McCaffrey? And this guy said, well, the contract is a nice contract to acquire, because over the next year and a half, you're only going to owe him $12.5 million. And so you can worry about redoing the contract, but it's so little this year, only 700,000 or whatever. And then the next 3 years, it's reasonable if he's a big star. But he goes, the thing that bothers me is that you're trading for a guy who missed 23 games over the last two years. And what really can you get for him? And he said, I would not pay a 1, but I certainly would pay a 2. I don't know that I'd pay a lot more than a 2. And obviously, the Panthers got 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round picks next year and a 5th round pick in 24. So I think GM Scott Fitterer did very well. Give me the little analysis as you see it.
I think you're right. I mean, obviously, whoever put out from the Panthers sort of privately that they were looking for 2 first-round picks, I don't think they ever thought that was going to happen. I think that was sort of their way to let teams know that they would like to try to get 1 first-round pick. And when we talked to Fitterer late last week, he thought in their trade value book or chart, they got pretty close to the equivalent of a 1 with all those picks you just mentioned. You know, having the 3 this year from the 2nd through the 4th picks. I think they did pretty well. I mean, I think it helped too that they had a pair of NFC West rivals sort of, and I think you made that point in your column today that they were sort of bidding against one another, at least to a point. I know the Rams would only go so far. And then something I wrote about last week when this trade was going down, Peter, I was reminded of September of 2017, right around Labor Day, preparing for week 1. It's Christian McCaffrey's NFL debut, and it's Kyle Shanahan's debut in San Francisco as the 49ers head coach. This was back when we would get the opposing coach on the press. Long story short, these, their history. Like Kyle played Mike Shanahan coached Ed McCaffrey. Kyle Shanahan babysat the McCaffrey boys. And I just remember him saying, like, a teenage Kyle Shanahan would be at the Denver facility, and he said, you'd look, and there'd be all these McCaffrey boys. And I remember the quote, he said, they rolled deep. But I think that was key, right? Like, I think that Shanahan McCaffrey dynamic was an important part of this.
You know, it's interesting. Kyle told me, I had a long talk with him Saturday night late. He said it wasn't me who babysat them, it was my sister. But I would come over sometimes because she said, man, these kids are wild. They run me ragged. And so Kyle told me that he basically would throw the ball to them in the backyard and they'd be out there playing tackle football. And, but I'll tell you what I find really, really interesting about this. Yeah, there's all these connections and all that. But I read this a lot over the weekend, and I really think it's wrong. I don't want to call anybody out, but I read, so in 2017, he's coming out in the draft. And that was the first year of the Shanahan-Lynch regime with the 49ers. And they allowed me to be a fly on the wall in their draft room for 3 days. Actually, 2 days. I didn't stay for the 3rd day. But there was a lot written and said about the fact that the Niners came close to picking him in 2017. Joe, I never heard Christian McCaffrey's name one time in all these discussions, in the meetings, in the talking back and forth. They weren't taking a running back in that draft. Now, they would have been smarter taking Christian McCaffrey than Solomon Thomas. But, they were going to pick Solomon Thomas. There was never any question about it. But so I don't think that this was a situation of the 49ers thinking that, we got to have this guy who we once missed out on. It was a situation that we got to do something about a pretty dormant offense because we just have not been able to score enough points. I think the one thing that really interests me about McCaffrey in Carolina, Joe, you've covered this team for a long time. How did the people of the Carolinas feel about Christian McCaffrey?
I think it was, unfortunately, we live in this world of instant reaction and hot takes. And there was a lot of negative fan energy online the last 2 years when he was hurt, Peter. And Christian was a guy while he was here. He didn't let you behind,
Yeah.
let us as media back behind his curtain very, very much. He wouldn't put the guard down. But I did ask him toward the start of the year just how all that affected him. And he made no bones. I mean, he made it clear that he had heard all that. And not that he kept receipts, as they say, but it was tough. I mean, because he was beloved here early on, but then that same team, a lot of those same fans last week were like, how could the Panthers trade this guy? Like, these are some of the same people who were like asking Christian McCaffrey when he was going to get back on the field in 2020 and 2021.
Yeah. It's funny. I just never got the feeling that he was so beloved. I don't know why, but I do think that in today's football, it's the right thing to trade a running back after 6 years if you can get a good haul for him, no matter how good he is. And I think he's really good, but I have no idea how much he's going to play from here on out. If you've played, and I made this point in my column this week, he has played 9 years. He's played 3 years in the Pac-12, and he played 6 years in the NFL. He's missed a bunch of time recently, but in his average game, he's had 21 touches, either rushing, receiving, returning. And for a guy who, I don't know, what did he weigh now? He's listed at 205. What was he? 208, 210?
Yeah. He's not a big guy, as you well know.
But so in other words, you just really wonder after a while, when are the bills going to come due? It looks like they've started to come due, on his health. And I'm sure he would say, fluky injuries, whatever. We're 4 injuries. So yeah, maybe they were fluky, but they're significant. I want to ask you 2 other things. One is about how, like when I look at the Panthers now, I think they're in really, really interesting shape going ahead in the immediate future because, look, they've struck out on their quarterbacks, obviously. Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold, now Baker Mayfield. So it's clear they're going to go out and get a quarterback. My question is, what's your gut feeling on the type of player Scott Fitterer and the owner David Tepper want? Do you think they will be desperate to get that first pick in the draft, so desperate that it will influence playing time decisions and things like that for the rest of this year?
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned Fitterer and Tepper in this equation. Well, the third person who's in on these decisions now is Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks being the interim coach, but also being the coach who joined Brian Flores' lawsuit for, minority coaches not getting a fair shake in this league.
Right.
And example specifically, that year he spent in Arizona, where he didn't get to pick the quarterback, felt like he got stuck with Josh Rosen, etc. And so I know what you're saying. And clearly trading Christian McCaffrey was the right move but you did trade away your best offensive player. And so was it with an eye on the number one pick? I don't think Steve Wilks is going to be playing any of those games. No matter what they maybe bumped up his salary, no matter what they've told him, knowing Steve Wilks, having covered him before, this locker room is rallying around him and rallying around PJ Walker right now. It's a 1 week deal. Like, look, I get it. I'm not painting the Panthers as a Super Bowl contender. It is a very weak year by all accounts and on appearances for the NFC South, Peter. And so this team, it's a fascinating dynamic. Would they be better off having a top 3 pick and drafting Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, or Will Levis? Yes. And they might get there. That might happen organically. But it won't be because Steve Wilks agreed to any sort of tank deal. Tank. I think for a team that's 2-5 and has had the turmoil it's gone through, this next month in particular shapes up to be pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I also look at, if you're Carolina and you get to the point where you really want one of those quarterbacks, even if you win 6 or 7 games, well, now you have ammo. You've got your first round pick in 24. And then you've got what should be a high first round pick this year, close. And obviously now 4 picks in the 5 picks in rounds 2 through 4. So I would think they're going to have enough ammo unless there's a golden boy like Joe Burrow was a couple of years ago, and Cincinnati wasn't going to take 5 ones for him. I don't sense this year that there is one must-have guy. Do you get any sense right now? Any idea what they might be thinking about this quarterback crop?
I think they, like you said, I think they feel like it is a very solid quarterback group. I don't know that they feel like listen, they're still figuring it out, but I don't know that they've identified one yet. Scott Fitter, I know, is, he's a former scout. He likes to go and see these guys in person. Dan Morgan, the assistant GM, like they're kind of old school that way. Like, I know some of these GMs don't go to games and they do a lot of the film study. Yeah. But I personally like the Will Levis kid right now. I think some people in the building here like him, but it's well short, Peter, of any sort of consensus or anything like that.
Does Steve Wilks have a prayer of getting the full-time job?
Was having that conversation with someone today, somebody with the organization whom I like and trust. And it's again to this idea of a weak NFC South. In 2014, you'll remember this, Ron Rivera's group, they'd made the playoffs the year before for the first time with the Rivera-Cam pairing. 2014, they had some injuries. I don't think Cam was playing particularly well early in the year. They're sitting there going into December at 3-8-1, and we're all writing their obituary. I mean, I said time to play the young kids, and Rivera did play some young guys. And long story, they end up winning their last 4 games. They go to the playoffs at 7-8-1, and they even win a game. They beat Arizona in the wild card round. And well, guess who was a member of that coaching staff? Steve Wilks was on that staff. Wow. And it's just going to be interesting. It's almost like right now, Peter, these 4 NFC South teams are simultaneously playing for the division lead and maybe a top 5 draft pick at the same time.
That's an amazing thing to say, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I could see any one of those four teams winning it because they're all flawed. They're all flawed in a major way. I'm going to end by asking you this one question that just hit me over the weekend, and I wonder if the Carolina Panthers knew that it was going to take a small package, including their second round pick this year, plus something else, who knows, for Sean Payton. Do you think they'd have any interest in him coming in and helping pick and train the quarterback of the future for this team?
Oh, I think they'd love it. That is right in Dave Tepper's wheelhouse. He's a guy that likes to make a big splash. He likes to he's not afraid to spend money. I don't think the money would be a factor, Peter. First of all, to answer your question, the Panthers would be very interested. I don't know that Peyton would be interested in, even with the idea of getting to pick one of these top quarterbacks in the draft. And you know, also David Tepper is kind of quickly or gaining a reputation in this league as sort of being a wild card owner.
Yeah.
I think a guy like Peyton would have some reservations and would, you know, want to have a lot of questions answered. But yeah, I think the interest on the Panthers side would be real and substantial. I don't get the sense. I think they even sort of get the sense here that Peyton probably would not come here.
You know, I'll just tell you this. I'm in touch with Peyton. I talked to him, I wouldn't say a lot, but I've talked to him 3 or 4 times this year since the start of training camp. I think he truly, absolutely, truly does not know what he's going to do after this year. Okay. He won't take a job just to take a job. He won't take a job where he doesn't have a quarterback. And I just think, this is just my gut feeling, I don't think you should eliminate Sean Payton from your thought.
Okay.
And now it'd be another thing. Would Gail Benson allow him to go coach another team in the division?
Right.
Or will she say, okay, we're good if you want to go. You're not going in our division to come and play us twice a year, which is probably a reasonable thing to say, but who knows? But Sean Payton, I think, I've always thought that he wants to go somewhere where the owner's going to spend money, where money's not an issue, where there's a quarterback. And I mean, Carolina is one of those franchises right now that you look at and you say, the only thing they have that is wrong is that they've been losing a lot. And so they must have a lot of things to clear up. And, you know, clearly if the most important thing is at quarterback and you've got a pick, say in the top 10, and you've got a bunch of picks and can maybe move up to fix that. I don't know. I'd never say never about this because this is going to sound funny, Joe. I think Sean Payton is very much tabula rasa, blank slate. Mm-hmm. And he is not going to make any decision until there's a decision that has to be made. So take that for what it's worth. I don't know. I don't know anything, but I don't think Sean Payton knows anything either. He has said to me, he goes, I might love TV. I might love the life. And, you know, he said this when he quit. I'm pretty tired of chugging Diet Coke or whatever at 2:00 in the morning to get another hour or 2 of work done. You know, I don't blame him. What a miserable existence. I only do it one night a week and I'm miserable. You know, but I just think, you know, you never know. That's how I would say about the future of Sean Payton. So we'll see.
I keep it open. Listen. It'd be fun. It'd be a great experience to cover him. And we had that we all in this beat had the Cam years, which were pretty wild on a lot of different levels. But it's been kind of a dry 4 or 5 seasons here, Peter. So we want to cover something interesting, man.
Hey, I know I said we were done, but I just have to say one other thing, that there's something about this Matt Rule thing that just bothers me. Matt Rule's a good guy, and I really feel like in many ways, and I don't know this because I'm not there, I really feel like he didn't have the undying support, especially of the owner, but of this organization either. I thought that was a weird coaching tenure. And I'm not saying it's right or fitting or whatever, but everybody will say, well, geez, the owner owes him $40 million. Don't throw a pity party for him. But you know how coaches are. Of course, 40 million is great. Let's do it. Hey, wonderful. But that's just not everything. I don't know. I just didn't like how the whole thing went down for the last year or so.
Yeah. Listen, Matt Rule is a smart guy. Like, he has forgotten more football than I'll ever know. And he knows offense, he knows defense, knows a little special team. I mean, he's coached all sides of the ball, both sides of the ball. It was a weird marriage right from the start, because they kept Marty Herney, and they didn't bring in the coach and the GM at the same time. Marty sticks around 1 year, but they give Rule control of the 53. And I know sometimes we make too much of that, and it's a contractual thing, but I think it's telling that Marty one more year, and then he was gone. And it'll be interesting too, and I think Matt Rule is probably a better fit at the college level. I think he'll go get one of these jobs and be terrific.
Yeah, I think he probably will too. Joe Person, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And it looks like a beautiful day in Charlotte. Go enjoy it.
Appreciate it, Peter.
Let's get into the second part of our podcast. Myles, I had the good fortune on Sunday night, before the Seahawks left Los Angeles after their 37-23 victory over the Chargers, to spend about 12, 15 minutes on the phone with quarterback Geno Smith, who really, to me, is, I think, the most amazing story in football this year, and that includes the Giants and the Jets. I think he's amazing because it's been 8 years since he's been a starting quarterback, a regular starter in the NFL. And right now he is leading the NFL in completion percentage. He's in the top 5 in almost every category. He's 3rd in passer rating. And he has shocked the world with what he's done. But the thing I said to him was, I said, I think your accuracy is amazing, considering where it was. He was a 58% passer for the Jets, and now he's 15 points better, in Seattle. And he said a lot of real smart things when we talked. And I just gave him a stream of consciousness in my column. But I want to read one thing to you and get your reaction. Quote, "I know I might have struggled out the gate in pro football. That's just the reality of the NFL. Sometimes they give up on you fast. The numbers at the beginning of my career are kind of skewed, if you ask me. If you look at Peyton Manning, if you just judge his rookie season, you'd never think Peyton Manning would have become what he became. Steve Young, too, Troy Aikman. The list goes on and on. Just got to have patience with young quarterbacks. You got to find the right young quarterbacks with the right mentality, who are going to continue to work and have a great attitude about the game and the struggle." That comes from the lips of a guy who has sat for the last 7 almost 7 full seasons.
Yeah.
And I just think if you can find a really bright, hardworking quarterback with some talent and just stick with them, who knows? There's more than one Geno Smith out there. And my feeling is at the quarterback position, with age comes wisdom. Experience begets a chance later in your NFL career. And I don't know, I was just really impressed with the guy. Your thoughts so far on what you've seen on Geno?
Well, I just love the way the Seahawks are playing, and watching that game yesterday that they had against the Chargers, I just kept thinking, man, they play with such an edge, and part of that obviously comes from Pete Carroll. We always use the cliche, the team takes on the personality of the head coach, but there was a moment in that game where there was some poor officiating going on, and Geno Smith was arguing with the official, Pete Carroll was arguing with the official. And then the Fox cameras caught Pete Carroll turning to Geno Smith. And when Geno Smith had started to go back into the huddle, and he said, Geno. And then Pete Carroll just put his hand down his chest, basically say like, hey, button it up. Let's stay composed. Let's do what we have to do. Geno Smith got back into the huddle, came out of the huddle, fired a first down pass. And you could see how fired up he was. And then I think they either scored a field goal touchdown at the end of that drive, but whatever it was, you could just see how well Pete Carroll and Geno Smith are working together. And you can see that the edge that they play with, they feed off of each other. And I love to see that kind of thing. I mean, Pete Carroll said it after the game. Who in the world would have thought that here we are, midway through the season, and the Seahawks are alone in first place in the NFC West at 4-3. It has a lot to do with the way Geno Smith has handled being that team's quarterback and performing at the level that he's performed at.
I just think it's marvelous when a guy understands who he is and can also understand that all I can do every day is just show up and work hard and be ready for my chance if and when it comes.
Yeah.
I thought the coolest thing that he said to me was, when I asked him about how, about how his mental part of the game is really important.
Yeah.
And he said, in essence, that it comes down to what we do and not what we say. And because, look, he's sitting there and they got a young running back, Kenneth Walker from Michigan State, a rookie.
Great job.
Who has been just really, really good. And so to me, when I look at his attitude, I just kind of say to myself, I really kind of say to myself, there could be nothing better for this team than a veteran guy who appreciates where he is in life, does not care if anybody in any newspaper or website writes about him, talks about him, whatever. He has wanted one thing: give me the ball and let me play. And that's what happened. And I really, really marvel at that. So I want to ask you about the other team in this game. And that's obviously the Los Angeles Chargers. You live in LA, you see the Chargers a lot. And I'm a little bit befuddled. When I think about the Chargers, I wouldn't be surprised, like mentally, they strike me as like a 2-5 team. But you look at them and they're 4-3.
Yeah.
Are they really good?
No. I mean, I feel pretty confident in saying no after seeing them last week against the Broncos. I mean, that was a game where if both teams could get a loss, then they should have gotten one, and maybe they should have ended that horrible Monday night overtime game in a tie. But the thing about the Chargers, there are two things about the Chargers that really concern me under Brandon Staley over the last couple of years. when they have chances to have good moments, just to have a good game, to put themselves in a good position, they never seem to do it. Last year they went and they played Houston, and yeah, they had a bunch of injuries, that they had a COVID situation. But when you have a quarterback in Justin Herbert, who is as good as we think Justin Herbert is, you need to be able to put a game plan together that wins. The Texans were not a very good team last year. Right? That ended up being a 4-win team. And you're telling me that you can't go into Houston and beat them? I don't know.
Yeah,
It's the same sort of thing that they have. This year they played the Jaguars in SoFi Stadium, and they're at home, and then they come out listless. You can't come out listless at home. It's the same thing that they did on Sunday against the Seattle Seahawks. You're down 17-0 at the first quarter. Why? And then the other thing that's really bothering me about the Chargers offense right now is these numbers from Justin Herbert, who, I've not seen an incredible amount of quarterbacks. I've not been covering the league for, as long as you have, Peter, and I don't go on training camp tours and whatnot. But I'll tell you one thing. Of the quarterbacks that I've seen in practice, Justin Herbert has the best pure arm talent that I've ever seen. Okay. I mean, the way he can fit balls into tight windows, the way he can throw guys open, the way he hits guys in stride, his ball placement is on point almost every single time. That's difficult to do. And the fact that he's been averaging 4.9 yards per attempt over the last 2 games is unacceptable. They throw far too many balls behind the line of scrimmage. I don't know what Joe Lombardi's got to do to unlock more of that offense that has talented guys on it. I mean, I know Mike Williams is now dealing with an injury. Keenan Allen's coming back from injury, but there are other guys there that Justin Herbert can go to. They have to do more to get the ball vertically down the field and utilize the arm talent that Justin Herbert has. I mean, it's like if you have a Ferrari in your garage and instead you decide that you want to go out and drive a Kia Rio every day. Why would you do that? You should never do that. Let Justin Herbert be great.
Totally agree. I got to go back and watch that game now, because that stat that you just gave is unbelievable, that he's less than 5 yards per attempt.
Yeah.
That's the craziest.
Over 2-game stretch. It's not just one. I mean, that Denver game was ugly, but this one too. I mean, it was 5-some yards per attempt in this one, which is also unacceptable.
Yeah. Let's talk about someone who is not at 5 yards per attempt, and that's Patrick Mahomes. I watched every snap of that game against the 49ers, and I just marvel at what I see out of Patrick Mahomes, because, and this goes back to training camp. I've talked a lot about this summer and early fall, that Patrick Mahomes was absolutely, totally determined to make sure that if they lost, it wasn't because they didn't have Tyreek Hill. And if you look at what this team has done right now and how brilliant Mahomes was on Sunday, it amazes me that this year, through 7 games, if you look at it, Patrick Mahomes right now is really on pace in many ways to be better than he was a year ago. And I think the one thing that really impresses me is how he has made it so possible for the new guys to come in and to play well right away. Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore has made an impact. Isaiah Pacheco, obviously, is such an interesting young talent for them. Yeah. Justin Watson, I'm forgetting Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who had a huge play Sunday against the 49ers. And I just say this because, you don't see this, you don't hear it a lot out of Mahomes, but mentally, he doesn't want people to think that he can't do something like adjust to life after a great receiver leaves. So it has really, really impressed me that he's gotten Juju and Valdez-Scantling, Mecole Hardman for a bigger role. on board to do a lot more than anybody thought that they would do.
Yeah, I mean, and it does. It goes back to the spring, to the summer, and Smith-Schuster was talking about this in his post-game press conference, that it wasn't just the work in Dallas that they did, but also he and Travis Kelce and Mahomes and Valdez-Scantling were all playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare together, which, who knows? I didn't realize that could really help your chemistry. But Smith-Schuster said the way that they were communicating and knowing how difficult it is to win a game like that, they won 3 games in a row, and they're like, yeah, this is going to really help us. And so there are a million different ways that you can help and expand chemistry. Obviously, I think, Patrick Mahomes having everybody in Dallas and practicing with them in April and May probably has a little bit more to do with it than the Modern Warfare stuff. But hey, Call of Duty, that could help. And maybe Kyler Murray wants to start doing that too.
I just want to mention one thing about Joe Burrow. Talked to him Sunday after the game. And, he played what you could argue is the best game of his career, considering when you throw for 481 yards, that's one thing. But he also completed the toughest pass. Next Gen Stats had that pass that he threw in traffic 43 yards in the air to Jamar Chase at the right pylon of the end zone, with a cornerback draped on him. I mean, just absolutely incredible that Jamar Chase catches the ball, understands that if it's not going to be him, it can't be anybody else. And I just think right now, sometimes we can end up taking guys like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow for granted. And absolutely we shouldn't. I want to tell you one thing that he told me that I think is really, really important for a quarterback to have. And it's the confidence in his receivers to be defensive players. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned this to me. And he said to me, and I'll read you his quote, "I also know I can take some chances that maybe I shouldn't. I do that because our receivers do a great job of being defenders if it looks like they're not going to be able to catch it. That's part of the reason why I've only thrown 1 interception since week 1 this year." And his point is that if Jamar Chase sees that maybe the ball is a little bit short of him or whatever, he's going to become a free safety, and he's going to try to bat the ball away from the guy who is in position to catch it. Tremendous awareness by a great young quarterback and a great young receiver.
Well, I do love the chemistry that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have, and I, also in your column, you talked about not throwing certain passes if he did not have all of those built-in reps that he has with Jamar Chase, because they've got that inherent trust. And you can't just build that in one day. You can't build it in 1 week, 1 year. I mean, you can't even build it in a season, right? When you have that kind of dynamic connection between those two guys, it just speaks to how successful they can be. And so, who knows if Joe Burrow will someday get Norm Van Brocklin off that top of the single game passing list, but who knows? It could happen. I mean, maybe it'll be this week. Cleveland's defense is not very good.
All right. We got 90 seconds left, and I'm going to ask you my question of the week.
Okay.
Who has a chance to rebound? Bucks or Packers? Discuss.
Oh boy, I'd have to say the Bucks. I think in part because of the division that they play in. Right, they're still in first place in the NFC South, despite how bad it's looked, and despite the fact that they are 3-4, and they could easily be 3-5. I mean, I don't know. I don't give Baltimore no shot of going to Tampa and winning that game at Raymond James Stadium on Thursday. So. But they still have Tom Brady, and it's tough for me to count Tom Brady out until he just says, I'm not going to do it anymore, and he actually means it. Whereas the Packers, everything is a slog right now. They have no dynamism on offense. Aaron Rodgers doesn't seem to trust anybody that's really out there except for maybe Aaron Jones. And if that's the case, then I don't really know what they're going to do. I mean, Alan Lazard wasn't playing at the end of the game. He got hurt, but that's part of it, man. I don't know what's going on with the Packers, but now they're so far behind the Minnesota Vikings. They've really got to play catch up.
I think I would say Green Bay, but only because they're slightly better on the offensive line. And they've got two young receivers who I keep waiting for the light bulb to go on, especially for Romeo Doubs, but we'll see. Myles, we're out of time. I appreciate you joining me this week, as you do every week. It's been a lot of fun. And, I also appreciate Joe Person explaining the Panthers. In the next few weeks, we're going to have some sort of different guests on the podcast. There's a bunch of really good books out about football and other things. We're going to have Jeff Pearlman on coming up. He wrote a new book about Bo Jackson. And we're going to have some other guests, but we're going to have some book guests just because I'd really like everybody to read more. And since I'm in charge of the world, that's what we're going to do. But anyway, my thanks to everybody for experiencing this episode of the Peter King Podcast. And we'll be back with another one next week.